It has become literally impossible for professionals to have a technical workaround around the cost of housing. And the reason is this: housing is deeply economic and less technical. So even though we all focus on the technical part, the design part, the construction part of housing, everything that has to do and controls the cost of housing is deeply economic and as a direct result of opportunity cost and alternative for God. As long as you're using a conventional method, as long as it has to do with cement, concrete block, irrespective of how technical or how sound or how creative and how smart you are, housing is a result of the economy and less of technical input. Yes, construction is technical, but that same construction amounts for less than 10 or 15% of everything that forms, that molds, and decides housing outcomes. It's so bad that in the last 3 to 4 years, the cost of housing permanently took an additional 30 to 40%, if we are being modest. That's 30 to 40% extra. That has nothing to do with profit, with loan, with your return on investment, an additional shadow tax that every homeowner, every builder, every developer has to pay. And it doesn't matter how good you are, how much of a DIY person you are, how much of cost cutting methods you know, that 40%, even more, overs on every and each construction project. And even this is only just because just a few days ago, the federal government just reduced the import tariffs on construction materials from what used to be 40 to 45 to 50% tariffs down to now 30 to 35 and 40%. All emphasizing the jeopardy of technical solutions. And no matter how sound, no matter what we do, no matter how much of smart technologies, creative design, technical resourcefulness that we apply, all of these mean nothing to shaking off that 30 to 45% additional cost, that shadow tax, as I have come to call it, on every housing cost. So maybe we should start with what I mean by the jeopardy of technical resourcefulness. Because first of all, for you to be able to manipulate the cost of housing, it means you need to be technically resourceful. But your technical resourcefulness means nothing if you don't consider economic reality. So your technical resourcefulness or creativity needs economic resourcefulness to mean anything. But apart from your experience and technical know-how, it's also the fact that just a couple of weeks ago, the cost and price of cement, of iron bars, of steel went up in the market, which means no matter how technically sound you are, market forces behave like market forces. And as long as most of our building and construction materials are import dependent, because the local market or the local manufacturing industry can technically or economically not meet the local demand, which still points to the fact that irrespective of what you know, how you can do it, all of this is still tied down to the fact that housing is deeply economic. And for you to have a breakthrough with the cost of building materials, you need to manipulate or influence or control it directly from the macroeconomic level of the market. And at which point, no singular individual can achieve. Which brings me to the peculiarities of the Nigerian local market. And to help you connect with this, I will reference the recently published World Bank's Industrial Policy Framework for 21st Century document, wherein it classified the Nigerian economy using 3 definitions. First is small government bandwidth. That is, government has little to no technical proficiency in interacting with the different facets of structural problems within its economy, which is because of the lack of the political willpower to actually find the right people, to actually fit the right pegs in the right holes. The second characteristic is Nigeria has a large local market. Look at our population. Look at the median age of that population. So we have a large population, a large market that even the country can use as a bargaining chip, as a leverage to attract investments, to attract partnerships. And number 3 is Nigeria has a small fiscal size. That is, Nigeria has a small budget size. Look at the size of our economy and how we typically always borrow to even fulfill our budget. So because of this, we cannot always throw subsidy or incentives at every problem. And when you put all these 3 together, what shines through the most is the lack of technical depth to actually address these problems as it should be. And the result is, in solving one problem, we create another problem. In imposing tariff ban to increase or improve local manufacturing, local production, we then drive up the cost of construction materials. And in there is the jeopardy of technical creativity. That even though all you do, all you know, is meant to help you reduce the cost of housing. However, because at the back end, at the macroeconomic level, there is higher tariffs plus naira devaluation, happening concurrently and at the same time. All of which, even though was intended to serve and achieve the purpose of improving the local market to drive local production and by that improve local consumption. But unfortunately, this results in a case of double jeopardy for the homeowners as the shadow tax on the cost of housing. And these two combinations, I mean, higher tariffs and naira devaluation happening simultaneously, concurrently, is the reason why in the last 3 to 4 years, the price of housing has literally doubled. And every developer or every homeowner that has built or acquired a home within this period can tell you for the fact how much or how deeply that hurts. Many will tell you how the cost of same shipments literally doubled overnight and how that made it impossible for them to deliver their project. One of these experiences that hit close to home was a certain project around the same time that a colleague, due to the fact that he did not have adequate storage, decided to ship his goods from China in batches. And between batch 1 and batch 3, the cost of tariffs and naira devaluation happening concurrently made it impossible. I mean, impossible for the project to continue. And this begs the question that despite all government is doing to improve and support local production, all its initiative to favor local manufacturing, why is it that despite all this has not yielded any meaningful results in bringing down the cost of building materials? I mean, why can't we fix this? And the answer is simple, and I'm sure a lot of people will not like this. But the answer is because the market does not want local. Because first of all, the mathematics or the logic of let's build or develop our own locally available building materials, which will help us save costs. That makes sense that yes, that would attract manufacturers to produce, to invest in manufacturing and producing these materials. However, deep down and beneath that logic is the reality that an average Nigerian does not want to live in a house built with local materials because we want to show our status. We want to signal that we have arrived. And so, because of this, we prefer these modern building materials, even though the cost benefit of using locally sourced materials is obvious. Many of us still prefer Italian tiles to Nigerian tiles. And while there is no problem with that, the fact that a larger percentage, a larger proportion of the market still wants to buy foreign, still wants to buy imported, still sees the local quality as inferior quality, investors and manufacturers and producers will not be encouraged to invest in such markets. But let's also assume that all of this was not an issue, was not a concern. There is also the lack of infrastructure. Because think about it. Even if there is demand, there is steady demand. What about the power that we use to manufacture to meet such demands? What about the transportation and logistics infrastructure that we use to deliver such products? Where is also the quality control to ensure that these products meet international standards? Or even the finance to do all of this? And because there is no finance, we stifle research and development, which limits our ability to discover or improve on the current building materials to even improve them and upgrade them to that international standard or to refine them to that level that makes the market desire to use them. So when you put these two together and then you layer on that the trap of sustainability, where in a bid to achieve sustainability, to attain green efficiency, cost of many building projects are driven up because many of these green solutions are import driven, all of which are also still affected by the tariffs and the naira devaluation issues. We want to adopt sustainability. We want to practice sustainability. But most of these green alternatives, most of these sustainability or sustainable products are also import driven. But don't get me wrong, this is not a blame game because at the end of the day, every policy has its price. Because even though the justification and the gain for raising tariffs is so that we can improve local production, we can buy local to grow local. However, the effect of that is housing, materials, everything import driven, then becomes more expensive. And if we say, oh, let's cut tariffs, let's remove tariffs, then everything imported becomes very affordable. However, the local economy, the local production, local manufacturing market then suffers and possibly dies. This brings me to why all of this is just a matter of opportunity costs and alternatives forgone. Because it is not about this or that. We're looking at how do we do this and that. The housing issue or even the economy itself is not a one size fits all. The economy exists on a spectrum. It is why we have the high class, the middle class, the low class, and also the in-betweens. So as long as we cannot find an average that connects all these three classes, so also we cannot find one single solution that solves all our economic or housing problems. All we can keep doing is seeking more opportunities, but which comes at less cost. And this takes us back to the classification of the Nigerian economy. Because if we can understand the peculiarities of our economy, then we'll understand how to solve the problems or find opportunities that can help us solve our economic problems. And which for housing, we filter through the lens of housing service providers to achieve housing affordability. So, if first of all, the government has low bandwidth, that is, it doesn't have the technical depth to solve its problem, then let's start from there and put and fit the square pegs in the square holes, the round pegs in the round holes. Let's find the right people for the right appointments. And of course, many of these problems are too big to be solved at the federal level. So let's also look down to the grassroots, especially for housing. Housing is too big to be solved by one federal housing program. So let's look into our local governments, our local council, our autonomous communities, and then let's coordinate our technical and professional resources and focus at solving these problems at the local and grassroots level. Also, we need to address infrastructure. It is no longer obtainable that in 2026, big 2026, as people say, that Nigeria still does not have basic power, basic logistic infrastructure, basic transportation infrastructure to power and enable economic activities. It is still very painful that even up to now, the Calabar Free Trade Zone has not really yielded that tangible result that it was intended to serve. And all of this is tied to the fact that the necessary infrastructure that zone needed to function, that zone needed to serve its purpose. I mean, how is a seaport supposed to function when the port itself is not completed? Also, since Nigeria has a large local market, beyond just using it to attract investors, to attract DFIs, we can use it as a real bargaining chip to attract technology transfer, such that for countries that have prefabricated building technology can come set up under a joint partnership arrangement where for them to be able to access this large market, the condition will be to partner with local Nigerian firms in order to transfer knowledge, in order to transfer technology and technical know-how. Needless to say that once we have the right people in the right positions, it then becomes easy to find more appropriate solutions for the different problems or the different crises or issues, instead of doing the rubber stamp one-size-fits-all approach. But this does not only concern government, because at the same time, the market itself and also the engineers, the architects, the professionals have a role to play. So for the market, the most important role is to shift cultural perception and cultural preference. Let's remarket our local building materials. Let's refine, let's research and develop our own local sustainable materials to that refined quality, that desirable quality that residents and homeowners don't have to wait until they see people that have used them or see government use them before they decide or choose to apply them in their own construction. And with all this, it then becomes easy for professionals to then plan, to design, to engineer for the real economy. Because now it becomes easier to recommend these materials because now they meet standard, they are refined, they are presentable, they are desirable. But as a responsibility for the professionals, it is important to plan, to then price and plan projects from the beginning, the possibility of dollar to rise and fall into each individual project. And what this would mean or imply is the need for flexibility in material recommendation. As now, blending locally sourced and imported materials gives you the flexibility to switch when necessary in order to gain the advantage of one at the expense of the disadvantage of the other. And for all this to be possible, it is important that professionals no longer just sit on give us better materials or reduce the cost of housing. We now take proactive actions in demanding better accountability for economic stability and just give us better housing or control the price of building materials. So let's bring this home to the fact that the Nigerian housing crisis is not a professional or proficiency challenge. Nigerian architects, engineers, builders, contractors, developers are technically and professionally sound. The housing crisis is not a technical problem, but a really deep macroeconomic crisis. And so instead of looking for a better engineer or a better builder that can help you save costs, focus more on demanding better accountability, on demanding economic stability, on advocating for sustainable economic development. And beyond all, pay attention to what is going on behind the curtains, what is happening behind each and every government policy, and how does it affect you? Because it is in that understanding, it is in that knowledge that you then understand how and why things are and what you can do about them to make them better. If I may leave you with one thing, is the fact that our individual choices, our individual actions, our individual behaviors have bigger impact and bigger effect on economic outcomes, on growth, on transformation, on economic development than any technical or professional shortcuts. So when we choose local, local grows. When we buy local, local gets better. Buy Naira to grow Naira is not just a political slogan, but the reality that for us to build our economy, for us to rely less on imported materials, and through which the price of building materials will come down, we must choose and buy and desire and improve our own locally sourced, locally produced, and locally manufactured building and construction materials. And I hope this helps.